the mysterious Highlander who demonstrated enormous skills as a shepherd but achieved lasting notoriety by stealing all his sheep. The character of MacKenzie the sheep stealer is wreathed in mystery. We don't even really know his name. Was it MacKenzie spelt with an MC or MacKenzie with an MAC? And James, John or Jock? Numerous books have been written about him, as well as plays and television dramas, and he remains one of pioneer New Zealand's few genuine folk heroes.
So MacKenzie's a really popular figure in New Zealand folk history and remembered by statues, place name, monuments, all over the place. His story has some really deep appeal. He gave his name to the vast pastoral basin in inland South Canterbury that was opened up to sheep as a result of his pioneering exploration. But he also earned historic notoriety as New Zealand's most famous sheep stealer. MacKenzie's origins are thought to lie somewhere here in Ross-shire in the 1820s, at a time when thousands of Highlanders were being turned off their ancestral lands and replaced by sheep. But exactly where our MacKenzie fits into this picture is impossible to say. One pioneer settler who claimed to have known him back in Scotland, however, reckoned that MacKenzie had contracted with the Lord Provost of Aberdeen to supply beef for a banquet being put on to mark the first visit of Queen Victoria to that city in 1848. MacKenzie promptly stole the animals required from the Lord Provost's own prize herd and then coolly sold the animals back to their owner. He then quickly departed for Australia once his crime was discovered.
Apart from supplying a roguish backstory to the shepherd, this anecdote gives us few clues as to his Scottish background.
In any case, MacKenzie eventually washed up in New Zealand, though even then it's unclear whether he landed first in Nelson, Lyttelton or Port Chalmers and what year he arrived in. Certainty only emerges in the early 1850s when numerous early settlers recalled him as an itinerant sheep drover whose work gave him a detailed knowledge of the landscape from Canterbury all the way down to Southland.
He was a memorable figure, much taller than the average, rough in his manners, and more comfortable speaking in Gaelic than English.
Frederick Meaville, a young Englishman who was the first Otago settler to take sheep as far south as Matoda, recalled how MacKenzie showed up at his primitive fern tree cottage here at Glenham in 1854. Now MacKenzie, who was soaking wet, just bowled into the Meaville house, took off all his clothes and hung them up by the fire to dry, completely unconcerned that Meaville's young wife, Fanny Richardson, was also in the room.
In Southland, MacKenzie earned a reputation as a petty thief, casually lifting equipment and food from his neighbours. But he was also admired for his toughness and his solitary ventures into the unexplored interior. It was said that though he couldn't swim, he crossed swift-flowing rivers by holding on to the tail of his body. This was a vital skill in a landscape dominated by dangerous waterways and gives us some hint of MacKenzie's determined character.
By 1855, he'd apparently decided to take up a run of his own in the Edinburgh area. And he built himself a little hut in the bush here as his base and then set off to find enough sheep to stock it with. The only problem was that he actually couldn't afford to buy the large number of sheep that were required under the land regulations of the day to confirm this type of land tenure. But not to miss out on his big chance, MacKenzie quietly slipped over the Waitaki River into South Canterbury, an area he apparently knew well from having worked there previously. It seems that MacKenzie scouted out and gathered together a mob of 1,000 sheep here in the Tycho Valley area, which was an outlier of the huge Levels estate, which at that time encompassed the whole of modern-day South Canterbury. It seems likely this wasn't MacKenzie's first sheep rustling venture to the Levels. The Rhodes brothers had noted 2 previous mobs of about 500 sheep mysteriously disappearing. It was on those expeditions that MacKenzie had discovered the inland route down to Otago through the mountain ring basin that now bears his name. Imagine that, one man with just a bullock and a sheepdog, driving hundreds of sheep through unexplored country and across numerous rivers. This bend on the Clutha near Alexandra may have been his crossing point. Well, sooner him than me. This time MacKenzie's tracks were noticed by one of the station's Maori employees, Wainui Tarawhata, who was known to his employers as 17. He reported the theft to the overseer, John Sidebottom, and together they set off in hot pursuit on MacKenzie's trail, accompanied by another Maori employee at the station, Taiko Torepi.
They caught up with the Scotsman somewhere near this monument marking the spot, which is situated deep in the country named after him. Here, the pursuers collared him, and then Sidebottom tied his hands and took away his boots as they made camp for the night. MacKenzie protested his innocence, claiming that he was driving the sheep south for a Mr. Mossman. And indeed, Sidebottom thought he could see other men's tracks, but no one else could be found.
During the night there was a disturbance among the mob of sheep, and Sidebottom, fearing the intervention of accomplices, decided to march through the night back to the levels. En route, a thick fog descended and MacKenzie seized the opportunity to bolt, escaping into the darkness. It was the first of a number of escapes from captivity that added to MacKenzie's mystique. On this occasion, he then walked 160 kilometres to Lyttelton at an incredible pace, but his plans to flee the colony were foiled by there being no ship ready there to depart.
While hiding out at the port, he was captured by the local police and subsequently sentenced to 5 years hard labour. Imprisonment proved a real struggle for MacKenzie, and he made 2 successful prison breaks, only to be recaptured within days. But his determination to reclaim his freedom attracted sympathy and closer scrutiny to his case from the local magistrate. In 1856, MacKenzie mysteriously received a pardon and was set free.
MacKenzie promptly disappeared from New Zealand, taking ship for a destination unknown, never to be heard from again. And without the presence of the man himself to keep things real, legends sprang up around him like weeds. Some related to his origins, some to his incredible feats of droving, some to his numerous escapes from captivity, and others again to his remarkable dog. There's even a later story of a return to Southland, where MacKenzie supposedly stayed a night at Harold's Ferry here in Taieri Mouth in 1857, where he met up with Ralph Swale, a pioneer settler who had known him well. Now, according to Swale, MacKenzie told him that he was on his way back to Edinburgh to collect some valuables that he had buried there, and then he was off to America.
It's impossible now to identify MacKenzie in Scottish records, or to find out what happened to him after he left New Zealand. But the big Highland loner certainly left an enduring imprint on the southern landscape. And this cairn, which marks the approximate site of his capture, must be one of the only memorials in the country with an inscription in English, Maori, and Gaelic.
Despite his crimes, we can still admire MacKenzie's skill and audacity in driving huge mobs of sheep across some of the most rugged territory in New Zealand with only his faithful dog to help him.
And likewise admire this magnificent landscape that must have reminded him of his home in the Highlands.